Well, we welcome everybody to our fourth webinar, and we have with us Dwayne and Marilyn, and welcome to the webinar.
Hello.
Yeah, and thank you very much for being willing to have a chat about our topic today and our theme. And our theme, of course, is reconcilable differences, where we're going to talk about fighting and arguing, and we don't want you guys to get in a fight or anything like that. Okay, and just be kind to one another as we look at the Song of Solomon and what kind of happens in this perfect relationship. It's been perfect up until chapter 5, and then what happens in chapter 5 is they end up having a fight. And who knew that would have happened? But it did. So let's just look, and if you have your sheet of paper with you, your Bible study, you'll discuss some of these questions. We're not going to go into all of them. And in your own relationship, in your own lives, you are coming up on 2 years married.
Yay!
And and you both
And
are
I still love her.
and you still love. You better still love her. And you both came from a past where you were a widower, you were a widow, and so making a new relationship there, certainly different from a lot of other couples in our church, because you both were widowed and widower very young, and so that must have its challenges as well as experiences that you have been through in this type of thing of dealing with stress in your own relationships in the past. That stress coming, of course, through sickness and death and things like that to have to deal with. Very difficult. I'm going to just ask you maybe a personal question. Is one lesson maybe that you learned from dealing with that kind of a problem, that kind of stress in your relationship? What would one thing be to you could say to somebody, look, if you're in a really stressful situation in your relationship, what's the one thing that's really important to do? Can you remember? Can you add to that?
First, take a breath and really understand whether it should be something that should be an argument or just a little time to take a breath and talk about it.
Okay, so under stress, whatever kind, you need that breath.
Yes.
You just cannot run full speed ahead.
No.
All right, so whatever you're facing in a relationship, the stressful times, whether it's an argument or something else, you need a break. Who used to say you need a break today? Was that McDonald's?
Yeah.
Go to McDonald's or do something to just put some space between you and the situation. How about you, Dwayne?
I find communication, keeping communication open all the time, and having it, be truthful, be out there and say, this is how I feel about it.
Okay.
Like those I statements people talk about, where you're not being aggressive towards her. We're so different in ways that, like people would say, well, black and white, but we've managed to overcome those differences by communication, by saying, you have the right to feel the way you do, the same way as I do, have the right to feel the way I do. And it keeps that flow going.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not absolutely right absolutely all the time. That kind of thing. Because I have to turn to her and say, how do you think about it? Or what do you think about it?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a big difference. And if she doesn't agree with me, then I have to think of why she doesn't agree.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps things flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not always centering on myself or my own ideas, because she has good ideas if I only let her have them.
All right. Those are two really important things, and I think we're going to get into those. The whole idea of using the I message rather than attacking somebody with the you message, and the idea of taking a break when it gets too stressful. Because those things will defeat you in any kind of difficult situation. If you don't get a break, and if you only see things selfishly about you, then and attack the other person, then you're going to be in really big trouble. Well, this couple got themselves into some trouble. We have this perfect relationship where we thought all was going fine and it was going to be happy forever for the rest of their lives. But look at what happens here in chapter 5, and beginning to read chapter 5, verses 4 to down to verse 6. She says this: "My lover thrust his hand through the latch opening. My heart began to pound for him. I arose to open for my lover, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my lover, but my lover had left. He was gone. My heart sank at his departure. I looked for him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer." So there's a misunderstanding here. He got upset. I don't know if it's justified. Maybe he's mad at her because she wasn't fast enough to open the door. You know, do those kind of arguments ever happen? You know, because we're
Yeah.
impatient. Oh yeah.
Impatient, yes.
Impatient, absolutely. So there's impatience here, obviously on his part. Maybe a slowness on her part. Maybe who knows? But whatever it is, now he's gone, and she's feeling bad, and she goes searching for him because they've had some sort of a falling out. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to talk about the self-centeredness that causes conflicts in our relationships, whether it's a marriage relationship or a family relationship, and those things can really. How does self-centeredness, and this is a question that's in your sheet here, but how much does self-centeredness play into the things that you fight about, and how do you get off of that? How do you get away from that self-centeredness?
Ooh, that's difficult at times. You know, like everybody likes to feel right.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to, you know, push their ideas to the max because, you know, you think you're right. But when we start to fight, I
Disagree.
look at the experience that she's had in her life and the experiences that I've had, and you know, like I thank God for bringing him in and bringing her into my life, and he's done wonders for my relational point of view, that I can look past myself and say, you know, if I do this, I'm being selfish or self-centered. So I need to bring her ideas into the forefront too, and weigh the situation instead of just saying all mine.
More than one point of view.
Yeah.
Okay, so more than one point of view you have to consider.
Yes.
Do you think that's hard for people to do?
Yes, it is. It's very hard. And so you need to listen to both opinions and come to a conclusion what will be best for you or us both.
What are some good ways to step back from an argument, from a real heated discussion? What are some good ways? We said go to McDonald's, but sometimes you can't always run out the door for a Big Mac, and maybe sometimes it's not the best choice in food. But what are some things that people can do, practical things, to step back?
Go outside, get some fresh air, go for a little walk.
Go for a walk, okay.
I think prayer has a lot to do with it.
Oh, definitely that.
You know, like just pray over what would you want God, what would God want you to do at that moment? How would he want you to deal with those feelings, those emotions that rise up and, oh, I'm the right I'm doing right, not her, or whatever, you know, and just give it to him and let him deal with that anger, and then once you're calmed down, and you can see things a lot clearer. Because when it's like a bull with a flag in front of you, all he sees is that flag, you know.
So what I think I'm hearing from you is when you pray, the situation doesn't change, but your understanding of the situation changes. And so nothing's changed, but you have changed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So prayer changes you. It changes your attitude. What else maybe that prayer might change?
Well, it changes the center of where things are. It's not pleasing one another, it's pleasing God too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because He doesn't want to see us fighting. He doesn't want us out there, arguing and biting each other and, causing all kinds of trouble when we can resolve it. Because that gives Satan a foothold. About, like it says in the scriptures about, don't go to bed with,
Anger.
with anger in your heart. Don't let the sun set on it. Deal with it. Get it over with. Give it to God. Let Him, Him help you through.
And I think you're so right when you talk about that whole thing about Satan getting a foothold, because it's not the problem as much as it's our reaction or our action to the problem when we don't step back, when we don't take a breather, when we don't go for a walk, when we don't pray. Sometimes if it's a really frustrating thing, it's a walking and praying,
Yes.
If we don't build that in, and if we don't give space, because sometimes somebody's trying to get out of the situation and the other person doesn't want to let them.
Yeah.
That can be really destructive.
Yes.
It's like a volcano, right? All of a sudden, boom, there's a big explosion. So prayer is so important. I agree with you. And then when we talked about that selfishness, Dwayne, you had mentioned to use the I message. So there is a temptation a lot of times for couples to blame the other person. How does the I message remove blame, and why is it important to remove blame?
Well, the use of the word "you" is attacking a person. Like
You.
typical, you always do that, or you never do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that puts a person on the defense, and that raises the level of stress that much more. When you walk into a situation, this is how I feel about it, dear. And it's my feelings. And you can't logically deny my feelings, you can't work around my feelings, they're my feelings. And that's the way I feel. Simple as that. And then it leaves her not on the defense, but there's where I
I
am.
understand.
And then she can respond in any way she can from there.
Marilyn, what's the best way you find to express your feelings?
We talk. We talk about all issues, and I find that very comforting that we can talk just about anything from both of our family sides and issues that are going on, events. We talk constantly about it.
So the communication and the talking is just so important.
Yeah.
I've known sometimes people, they write it out and they'll
That's
leave
what we
notes,
do.
about their feelings.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are on these shifts, and they have this lifestyle that's so busy, they don't get a chance to sit down and talk.
Mhm.
They still got to share their feelings, don't
Yeah.
they?
Yeah.
If they don't, boy oh boy, when there is a stressful situation, it all comes out,
Yeah.
and it's usually very, very acidic. It just eats away at the relationship.
I've always found that if you let the little things go, they pile up
Mm-hmm.
and become big things.
Yeah.
And it's easier to deal with a little thing at a time than it is that mountain of stress that you build up because you haven't said anything. And I would rather get kind of blasted a little bit every day than have a huge blow up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a typical guy. I leave things where they're not supposed to be.
Doors open.
I never do that, Dwayne. I hope my wife isn't listening.
And Marilyn likes to keep things nice and orderly. So I keep telling her, tell me when I do these things. Don't let it build up until one day you just explode at me and saying, look at all the stuff you didn't do or you're supposed to do. But,
Communication.
Communication. also in this study, it's going to lead us into Philippians chapter 4 and verse 1, not 4 verse 1, 4 and verse 8, one of my favorite verses. And it talks about having the mind of Christ, and to think on things that are pure and things that are lovely, and basically to think very positive about the other person. And I just am wondering how you keep your spouse in a positive light, how you keep that positive attitude. Because let's face it, nobody's perfect. We can always just look at our spouse and say, well, here's what's wrong with them. And there's some people that do. They're trapped in this thought that, well, this is what's wrong with my spouse, and they can give you the list. You know, how do you change that, Marilyn? Or
Well, we have basically tell each other how much we love each other regularly.
all right,
We always say, I love you.
She, I explained it to her this way, like, anytime I leave the house, I kiss her goodbye. I said, because this might be the last time you see me.
You know?
And the last thing I want you to hear is, I love you.
Yeah.
and,
And not words of anger.
and not words of anger.
Yeah.
And you know what? You have a perspective on that because of the loss that you have experienced in former relationships
Yeah.
that maybe other people don't have. They maybe take for granted that that person is just going to walk through the door. And I know this sounds a little bit morbid, but it is also, it's true. You know, any word could be the last word.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so you need to keep looking at a positive light. People usually have two impulses in a fight, and God has built this into us, and that is they either fight or they run, flight. So which are you? Which are you?
I'm a stand there and talk.
Okay, so you're a stand there and fight it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you a stand there and fight it out, or
I think so.
okay?
I think so. I like to, again, take that little
Yeah.
breath. And then I have even cried because I want to release some of that stress. I don't want to start an argument. I just need to
Mhm.
get it off, and then let's talk about it.
That's the woman's secret weapon, by the way.
Yes.
Oh, you know, but there's fight or flight, but there's two other words that are like that, and that is one is called flooding, and that is where you're going to talk it out, but because it's so pent up that it comes out like a flood, and it's not just that issue, but people bring
All the others that you've been hanging on to.
That's right. All the other stuff
The
back
baggage.
to, before I met you, to on our wedding, and to your mother, and you don't just get the issue. They don't never fight about the issue, but it just all this stuff floods in. And that's destructive.
Yeah.
What's your advice to somebody who maybe tends to be a flooder?
Well, it's like I said earlier, I would rather have her come to me with the little things, a little at a time, instead of letting them become a big thing. That way you don't get that flooding effect. You're dealing with one point at a time
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and concentrating on that. And it's easier to deal with that one point than if you got a whole table full of stuff you got to deal with.
Yeah, because even when couples get in trouble, a lot of times they can't see their way through that whole table of stuff. It's like the table is a mountain of stuff, right?
And at the end of the fight, they don't know what it started.
Exactly. It's just a go nowhere. It's a flood. It's a flood, and they drown. The other side of that is the person who would stonewall, and usually you end up with stonewallers and flooders kind of seem to find each other, marry each other, and they cause each other's problems, because the flooder, it floods the person who's the stonewall. He just puts another brick in the wall, and every brick that person puts in the wall causes that other person to raise the floodwaters, and stonewalling is to build this wall up and hide behind it. And Marilyn, what do you think would be some things that would help a relationship to begin to take the bricks out of the wall?
I think if you, again, prioritize some of the issues that you have, is it just a little petty argument? And write them down. Sometimes kind of make a list of what you think are issues, and maybe once you start to write it down and maybe you think, well, that's really not an issue. And slowly start to talk about them one at a time. Don't throw the whole bandwagon in, just.
Yeah, yeah, so breaking the issues down and being able to communicate them.
Yeah.
And that's what the Stonewaller doesn't do.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that Solomon might have been a bit of a Stonewaller here.
Yeah, that's,
He's gone and she doesn't know where to find him, and he's like completely out of the picture, and she's fit to be tied, because what's she going to do? She has no idea. And that's exactly where the Stonewaller wants to put the other person,
Mhm.
in this place of kind of lostness and disadvantage. So maybe you can decide whether Solomon is a Stonewaller or not, or whether the Shulamite is a flooder. Maybe we have that going on a little bit in their relationship. Well, I want to thank you for stopping by and for being a part of this webinar. I think this was a great discussion, and I think that this is going to help for each one of our different Connect groups to enter into their own discussion and really have a great discussion. And so thank you so much for coming by, and you folks just enjoy your time together as you now go into your Bible study. God bless you.